On June 23rd, 2022, on a trip to Boise, Idaho for the Craft and Commerce Conference, I met up with my friend and fellow chef John Merrick for dinner at this place called Kin. The menu centers around a theme. Tonight's was superstition, and all dishes are plated, presented, and enjoyed for the entire communal table. More on how they take advantage of this in a bit, but to start, In Vivo's Sud de France Rosé from 2020 served with this first presentation, a rabbit liver mousse with flavors of strawberry, rhubarb, pepitas, herbs, and sorrel. The idea being that this was in reference to the lucky rabbit's foot superstition, and this to me was a great example of right ideas executed poorly. Flavor-wise, the rabbit liver was completely buried with the garnishes, and the greens were not dressed at all, which meant that I basically needed to put the tart off to the side and then toss the puree and the vinaigrette with the greens in order to not just be eating raw mustard leaves, shaved rhubarb, and mizuna. But by the time that was all tossed, the pumpkin seed crumble soaked up a lot of that liquid, making this not enjoyable at all to eat. I really wanted this tweaked a little bit and placed later in the menu, like after a main course, for example. It was also a letdown that the rosé this was served with was followed up by this Maison Albert Bichot's Chardonnay from 2018, which was a weird transition for the palate. Served with this wine, two superstitions, crossing your fingers and knocking on wood, a chilled asparagus soup with dill and pine smoked morels. Next to that, a baguette, which was dusted with pine powder. Again, so much weird here. The soup was fine. It wasn't particularly flavorful and ate more like a broth than a soup. The morels were dry and crumbly, and the asparagus was too big for the spoon that we were given to eat the soup with. Just grilling the bread on one side was a weird touch, and to me it was one of two things. It was either intentional, the idea there being that you would leave one side soft so that you could soak up any soup that was left in the bowl, but by the time you ate all of the garnish with your spoon, the soup was effectively gone. Not even mentioning the fact that I don't think of bread soaking with cold soups, and if it was not intentional, that was a pretty bad execution detail to miss. Conobium's 2020 Lazio Bianco came next, followed by this superstition around broken glass. Weirdly enough, glass actually broke during this part of the meal. Sorry for the on-camera audio here, but I just wanted to play this real quick.
Now, superstition around broken glass. It can be good luck or bad luck.
This is cod with potato glass, fried potato skins, fava beans, and pickled peas. Yes, those are supposed to be brown. This fish was dry and super tiny as our second to last savory course, but the garnish actually ate pretty well. I basically enjoyed the cod first with the first potato skin and some of the garnish, and then the last potato skin I kind of ate as its own separate portion with whatever was left on the plate because the ratio of protein to garnish here was a bit off. Phenomenal spoon here for this next course, inspired by the chef's upbringing in Poland, with the idea being that the evil spirits would be warded off by drinking chamomile tea. This is a granita with lemon. This was incredibly tasty, no complaints here, but again, weird execution because we still had this, a lamb main course, which we were told was supposed to tie into the East Asian superstition around the number 4, this being the 4th course on the menu. This lamb served with broccoli, a lamb sausage, and a fried rice cake. Again, I was a bit confused how to eat this. The sausage was delicious on its own, but the rice cake was portioned a bit too thin to actually add anything other than crispiness to the dish, and the cook on the lamb was sous vide at its worst to me. I really wanted more Maillard reaction on this. This one was served with a Chateau d'Opia Minervois, a Rhone blend from 2019. Last up, a Hard Luck Woman. This is a cocktail made from cognac, pisco, branca menta, and lemon. A really tasty pre-dessert cocktail served with a superstition of stepping on cracks and breaking your mom's backs. This didn't really have as much of an impact because they did the breaking thing twice with the glass earlier on in the menu. To me, this was such a missed opportunity with anything seasonal to be serving lemon as the showcase dessert in June. The textures were great on this little lemon bite, but everything else was just flourish in my opinion. This is a wet towel. Don't eat that. We did get a live musical performance at the end from one of the team members. It was fun. Everybody enjoyed this. Oregano cookie as a takeaway. I ate it the next day and it was fine. The total for the two of us came to $297.30. I don't always do this, but I am going to jump in at the end here because, listen, there was a lot to not like about this meal. I'm going to just keep reading from my script here. You can take this with whatever grains of salt that you need. But yeah, there was a lot to not enjoy here, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that part. But please know that none of this is meant to bash the team or bring anybody down. It's done with the hope of bringing light to details that help those of us who make menus. Because going out and eating like this, experiencing these types of restaurants helps me write my menus. It helps me help you folks with your menus, and it helps me think about prioritizing the right things during dish development and prep, and then ultimately service so that guests have a great experience, because that's what we all want, right? I'm all for creative expression, but I saw really specific gaps in this menu where the kitschy nudge inspiration behind the dish took away from certain dishes actually being delicious. Not to mention the pretty forgettable beverage pairings. Those just kind of felt like thrown in as like a last minute detail. So I'm heading back to Boise actually this summer for that same conference. I think it's a really cool city. I hope that these types of experiences thrive in the long run. But to really tie this with a bow, subjective thoughts here, structure matters, right? Having a heavier course or a heavier wine go before a lighter one in a tasting menu is 9 times out of 10 a setup for failure for that lighter dish. And I know that it might seem like, oh, we're going to buck the trend. If you watch my Tarzani Jane video when I talked about that menu where that went completely in reverse, the first course we had was a beef course and it went backwards from there. It was like, yes, it was creative. Yes, I had never had that before, but it was like, I didn't necessarily think that that was the best way to set up those ingredients for success, because that's not how you're not changing the humans, you're changing the menu structure, but we as humans still experience flavors and our palates haven't evolved that far. Also, seasoning components might seem like a fundamental duh, but it bears repeating here. Also, when you make a new dish, eat the whole thing so that you can see how the ratios of different components will genuinely be experienced by the guest. We used to do this all the time, and you can see this when I would do Dish of the Day episodes. This is how I would do it. I would eat the whole entire dish to make sure that I was getting to experience what the guest would experience when they had to eat the whole bowl or the whole plate of that thing. If you're going to serve something, make sure that it is the fully realized expression of that thing. Don't go halfway. Like if you're going to serve soup and bread, have it be a really killer soup and make it the best grilled bread that you can. Don't half grill it and then serve it that way, or explain why you served it that way, because it's really not that normal to receive a half toasted piece of bread. Another example, if you're going to say that you're seasonal, don't have a winter dessert on the June tasting menu. And listen, this totally seems like something I've experienced in restaurants before, where the savory side of the kitchen takes the strawberry, they take the rhubarb, they take the peas. What was the last one? Peas? Strawberry? It doesn't matter. It just seemed like there was something missing from a communication standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, and everything else was so tied in with wanting to be creative, and it was just like to default to going to something like lemon just seemed like a bit of a cop-out. And lastly, do what you need to do to serve generous portion sizes. I talked about this in the newsletter a couple weeks back because it's so important. If you need to charge more, charge more. If you need to order ahead of time, order ahead of time. If you need to buy a scale to portion properly so that you know that every single piece is 150 grams or whatever you need it to be, it's so crucial, and it really can make or break a guest experience at the end of the day. I don't want to see Kin change the communal setup. I don't want to see the collaborative tie-ins change, like the art on the walls that they do, which is really beautiful. And that ultimately inspires the plating. They talk about that. The aesthetics of the dining room, the local sourcing. There's so much that I don't want to change. Like, I want them to keep that. But I am going to call out certain things that I see that I think could be genuinely changed that will ultimately lead to, in my opinion, a better guest experience, because I want this to be helpful. You folks know that I view these meals through the lens of flavor and execution. And I'm going to tell it to you straight so that it might help you folks watching do your best work when it's time for you to write a menu or launch your concept or go for that new position. So thanks as always for watching. My name is Justin Khanna. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope you folks have a good one.